Halito, and welcome to Native Chalk Talk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our native ancestors' stories and history alive, while also sharing with you our native culture, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And I hope you'll do me a favor. Feel free to like and share these episodes. I so appreciate it. Yakoki. Today, I'm thrilled to highlight a tribe and region we should all learn more about. Step into the rich tapestry of Alaska's cultural heritage with a journey into the vibrant world of the Alutiiq tribe. Amidst the breathtaking landscapes of the last frontier, the Alutiiq people represent a story of resilience, tradition, and enduring spirit. Join us as we explore the fascinating history and living traditions of this remarkable indigenous community. I'd like to introduce you to Scott Larionoff, originally from Kodiak, Alaska, and now a resident of Vancouver, Washington. Scott is a citizen of the Alutiiq tribe of Old Harbor, where his ancestral story is deeply rooted, and he is an alumni of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where he graduated with a master's degree in rural development. While attending undergrad and graduate school, Scott was involved in Alaska Native organizations such as Native Student Council, Native Student Services, Kodiak Inc., and Old Harbor Native Corporation. And he was an Awa'uq Scholarship intern recipient from Kodiak Inc. and the Kodiak Education Foundation. Scott, welcome to Native Chalk Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'd like to also mention that you work for TEPA companies, of which I am a great fan. TEPA is owned by the Paskenta Band of Nomlaki Indians, whose chairman, Andrew Alejandre, I interviewed on Native Chalk Talk previously. Great company. Tell us more about what TEPA does and what your role is there.
Yes, so TEPA, I guess I'll just start from the beginning where I was originally introduced to TEPA. I was sponsored to go to a ACES conference, American Indian Science and Engineering Society conference in Palm Springs, where I was connected with TEPA as they were there recruiting STEM majors, and my native corporation actually sponsored me to go there, Kodiak and Kodiak Education Foundation, as you mentioned. And actually, one of the Paskenta Band of Nomlaki Indians tribal members recruited me, and so I started last September and relocated to Vancouver, Washington in October. And the TEPA has welcomed me with open arms and been very, very helpful in my career so far. And TEPA, they're as you said, tribally owned general contractor. They do a lot of federal work, and my role is, tribal solutions. So I work more so on the tribal side as we're delving into that business. And so I do tribal construction and business development for them as I interface internally with all of the business units for potential clients, projects, and even some development on our internal side. And so, yeah, I'm super excited. I've dove right into all that TEPA has to offer as a Native American person myself, and they've really helped in supporting me with the relocation to a new state. So,
I mean, how often is it that we as Native Americans get to work for a Native American company, much less one we love, and we get to do really cool things? So kudos to you and kudos to TEPA.
Yeah, I'm very appreciative, and as you mentioned, Chairman Andrew Alejandre, he's been a very big help and a very big role model for me so far. So yeah.
No surprise there, honestly. Such a good guy. So hello to Chairman Alejandre. Listeners, we're going to learn a lot today about a topic I am proud to share about, but one many of us know so little of. We'll learn about Alaska and its history, Scott's tribe, the Alutiiq, a few topics that elders would like for us to discuss, and about Scott's own family history. And I'll ask questions such as, is it proper to say Eskimo or Inuit? And we'll walk through some interesting facts about Alaska as we put Scott on the spot for a game of Alaskan trivia. Before we get started, I was going to ask how cold it actually gets in Kodiak, Alaska, but it's not as cold there as I thought. In fact, it's a temperate rainforest. So, what typically is the coldest temperature in the winter there?
So it ranges. Alaska is a very big state. So Kodiak, where I'm originally from, in the winters it would get, growing up it was like 30 degrees, maybe sometimes 20s, and that was the coldest I ever remember. And
Oh,
now it's getting to like 10 teens, somewhere around there. I keep in touch with family and friends from back home, and they're telling me how much colder it's getting. So yeah.
oh. Yeah, so this is just one of many probably misconceptions that we will clear up today. Not all of Alaska is freezing cold. And so just look for more of those aha moments, listeners, because we will be running into those. Then looking it up, the lowest temperature recorded was in January of 1989 at -16. And I mean, that's cold, but that's not really typical for the area. So Kodiak is in the Gulf of Alaska. And how far is it from Anchorage?
So in flight time on an Alaskan Airlines flight, it's about an hour flight, maybe 45 minutes, depending on the wind. And then if you were to drive, it would be a 4-hour drive from Anchorage to Homer, which then you would have to hop on a ferry, which is a 12-hour ferry ride to
Oh,
Kodiak.
wow.
Yeah.
That's a long ferry ride, but I bet it's a beautiful ride, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, wow. So, speaking of beautiful, what does Kodiak look like? I picture trees and mountains. Is that the case?
Yeah, so Kodiak is pretty much an island of mountains, is the best way to explain it. The city of Kodiak is actually at the base of Pillar Mountain, and so when you're flying in, you'll be coming from the north side, and you'll off to your right, you'll see Pillar Mountain with, I believe there's 6 windmills up there, and yeah, and so actually, not to, as you mentioned, Old Harbor is the village I'm from. So from Kodiak to Old Harbor is a 30-minute bush plane ride.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So, if you were going to leave the Pacific Northwest and go visit Kodiak, see your
Mhm.
family and all that, how do you get there?
Uh, Most efficiently, fly. So fly from Portland, and I can either go straight to Anchorage or to Seattle, then Anchorage, and that's about a 3.5 hour plane ride. And then from Anchorage to Kodiak is, like I said, an hour to 45 minutes.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's actually a touristy town, right? Or is it
Yeah,
not that way?
so no, it is. So in the summers, we expect cruises to come through. We have guiding businesses that are thriving throughout the island. And Kodiak, who you mentioned, they actually own the Kodiak Brown Bear Center, which is really big on tourism, and you get to go out and see the infamous Kodiak Brown Bear.
Oh, I want to do this so bad. Listeners, if I end up going there, I will let you know. And Scott, I will go say hello to your family. They'll probably be like, who is this woman coming to us? Knock, knock, any Larionoffs here? Kodiak is an island in Alaska. And of course, most of us know Kodiak as the name of a bear. In a bit, we'll talk about which came first. Was the bear named after the island, or was the island named after the bear? And what did the Russians have to do with its naming? But first, let's set the record straight here for myself and my listeners. I'd like to understand the proper nomenclature for the Alaskan people, the tribes, and their culture. So help me out here, Scott. We've heard the former and now retired term Eskimo, and we've heard the term Inuit. What is the proper way to describe a Native Alaskan person?
The formal name that I've heard throughout Alaska when you're referring to the entire state is Alaska Native. Eskimo, like you said, is now not as popular. There's still some tribes that go by Eskimo, and the term Inuit is actually the Alaska Native people north. I am not Inuit, so yeah.
Oh, that's so good for us to know because I think my interpretation over the last few years is like, okay, anyone who is an Alaskan is an Inuit, and that's actually incorrect. So that's good to know. Side note, in the article, Inuit or Eskimo, which name to use, Lawrence Kaplan states, linguists believe that Eskimo is derived from a Montagnous Innu word meaning netter of snowshoes. By the way, I do apologize if I get some of these words incorrect, and you're welcome to correct me along the way. And further, many Alaskan indigenous people refer to be called by the name of their own languages, such as in your case, Alutiiq, correct?
So Alutiiq is actually the Russian name for us. We often get grouped up with the Aleu, which you will more commonly see, but we are Alutiiq.
Alutiiq. Okay. So which do you personally prefer? Just Alaskan, Alutiiq, something else?
So Supiak is actually our name for ourselves, which I believe the definition is like a lot of tribal names is a real person. So yeah, we go by Supiak, and I believe the G in there is more of a throat sound, which I'm still working on. So bear with me.
Okay. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, no, I'm not obviously not one to judge. We'll be back after this quick break. Are you in the medical field looking for your next opportunity? Listeners, I'm proud to introduce you to Native American veteran-owned staffing company, Worldwide Medical Staffing. Owner and CEO Jackson Weaver is a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and is a service-connected disabled veteran, where he and his team staff for commercial healthcare and government entities such as the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and DHS, and specialize in staffing Indian health and VA hospitals nationwide. Isn't it nice to know that our veterans are being cared for by staff who have been handpicked by a veteran who's been in the staffing business for 17 years? Healthcare job seekers, check out these open jobs on www.medical.com. If you're seeking temporary, long-term, or permanent placement of physicians, advanced practice, registered nurses, and more, check out www.medical.com. And Diako Ki to our medical professionals and to those who have served our country. All right. So then when it does come to, those of us who were saying Inuit for all Alaskan Native people, do you think it's just safe to say Native Alaskan or Alaskan Native?
I would say Alaska Native is probably the best way to go about talking about all Alaska Native people from Alaska.
Perfect. Let's
Yeah.
just take the safest route for now, unless someone corrects us, y'all. So, okay. Thank you for helping us out with that. All right, listeners, hopefully this helps as we address Alaskan Natives in the appropriate way. It's about respect, but it's also about just understanding and being in the know. And speaking of being in the know, when people think of traditional Native American tribes, they think of headdresses and teepees often. But the truth is, there were hundreds of tribes, and only a portion of those dressed in that fashion and lived in teepee dwellings. And I assume the same for indigenous Alaskans. We who don't know a lot about Alaskan natives automatically think igloos when we picture the traditional homes. So would you clear up the misconception we may have of igloos? Did every Alaskan native live in an igloo?
Not necessarily. I know igloos are bigger up north and more popular up north. And now I'm speaking from my limited education here, as
Sure.
this is not what my degree was focused on. But from being from Alaska and the place I was, the igloos were definitely a lot more popular up north and portrayed more so in history as an northern thing, as we don't always have snow on the ground in Kodiak.
True.
So our houses looked a little bit different. So
Yep.
yeah.
That's such a good point. And I have to make that correlation in my head that a lot of folks who immediately think of Native Americans as living in teepees and wearing headdresses is really kind of correlated to the Northern Alaskan indigenous people, which we think igloos and everyone's called an Inuit. So the light bulb's coming on as we speak. And it's funny because we're from the same country and we're both Native Americans, but yet very far away in our nomenclature as well as how we grew up and the types of people we grew up around. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So according to Alutiiqmuseum.org, this tired stereotype traces its origins to 20th century portrayals of Northern people by the media. Movies about the Inuit of the high Arctic taught Americans that Northern indigenous people lived in snow houses or igloos, obscuring the diversity of Arctic cultures and housing types. Although the word igloo comes from the Inuit word for house, it can refer to a variety of structures, a permanent wood and sod house, or temporary shelter made of snow. Although Alutiiq people never used snow houses, the Alutiiq word for house, angluk, is similar to igloo. This reflects the deep linguistic ties between coastal societies of the far north. First off, did I say that word correctly about the word for house? And what were the traditional Alutiiq dwellings?
So your guess is as good as mine, but
Okay.
the word that I was told growing up is barabara. So it is a sod house that is made out of trees and moss and all the naturally occurring plants around the island and in that area. So yeah.
Okay. And by the way, I'm taking notes of the things that you're sharing with me so that I can learn along the way. Does Alaska have reservations like we do here in the lower 48?
That is a great question. So the only reservation that I'm aware of in Alaska is the Metlakatla Reservation, and it's on the island in southeast Alaska and served by the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. And kind of just to expand on Alaska a little bit and current times, there was actually an application put in 2022 for land to be put into trust for a tribe. And beyond that, what we were allowed to do beyond putting land into trust is kind of a different structure with Alaska Native corporations having the ability to create a settlement trust, which I believe was brought up in 1987, but was formally put in the 1991 amendment for ANCSA, which is the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act.
Yeah, and speaking of, we'll talk a little bit more about that Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act and why other Alaskan tribes don't have reservations today like the Metlakatla community does. 17.6% of the population of Alaska are Native, and there are 229 federally recognized tribes today in Alaska who belong to 13 Alaska Native regional corporations. And these corporations administer land and financial claims. But that's not a term I'm as familiar with, the corporations. Would you explain that structure to us?
So, yes, absolutely. One thing I will talk about, though, and correct you on is there's actually only 12 native corporations now.
Okay.
Excuse me, the 13th one was for Alaska Natives who were no longer residents of Alaska and maybe relocated to Washington. And so it's based out of Washington, but they had some difficulties and it's no longer a corporation now. But yeah, so the structure, I guess I'll give some context and background on that one too. So Alaska Federation of Natives was formed in 1966, where the movement originally started, and they were working on that was one of the first government to government relationships that I'm aware of besides the Alaska Native Brotherhood, and that led to the passing of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act in 1971. But to delve into more so on a personal structure for myself, you have your regional corporation, Kodiak, and then you have your village corporation, like Old Harbor Native Corporation. And so the subsurface rights of the region belong to the regional corporation, Kodiak. And so the surface rights were allotted to the village corporation in that area. And the 12 the regional Alaska Native corporations right now are Doyon, Cook Inlet, Chilista, Bristol Bay, Bering Straits, Otna, Alutiiq, Arctic Slope, Nana, Sea Alaska, and mine, Kodiak. And so I believe there's around 225 village corporations. And so just to get a little bit more into the structure legally is so comparing, let's compare my native corporation to TEPA. So TEPA is a tribally chartered LLC, right? It's chartered through the Paskenta Band of Nomlaki Indians. Native corporations are chartered through the state still, so they have to follow state jurisdiction and all the tax laws and everything that is put in place there. And so going back to 1971, when it was actually passed, the way that the stockholder system works is if you were born before 1971, you were able to sign up for shares and you were granted 100 shares or however many that corporation chose to give you. And so if you're born after 1971, the only way to receive shares is through inheritance, unless the corporation has open enrollment. And so, yeah, that leads into a lot more stuff. But another topic I wanted to touch on is the revenue sharing. So the revenue sharing, if you couldn't tell, this is what I was mainly focused on in school.
Yeah, which is fascinating because a lot of people don't know this, even amongst their own tribes, how it all works. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the next topic I wanted to touch on, and this is kind of where our native values came into place, is the revenue sharing of all the corporations. And so, whenever there was natural resources developed in a certain region, 70% of that was split between all the regional corporations. And so that gets split up between all 12 of the corporations, and then they got to keep a certain percentage of that, as 50% was then passed on to the village corporations in that area. So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, coming all the way down the line, there's different structures for stockholders in which class of stock you hold. So let's say you are a shareholder in a village and regional corporation. That's a Class A stock you get from the regional corporation. If you only have stock from your regional corporation, then it's a Class B stock. And there's some corporations that actually now have a Class C, which some people were maybe serving in the military during 1971 and weren't able to sign up for stock. And so there's a Class C if you were eligible and alive during that time.
Hmm. So I was reading about the Awa'uq Native Corporation, which represents Native shareholders, over 1,000 of them. And then the Alutiiq tribe is a subsidiary of that corporation. Did I get that right?
So a Foganac Native Corporation, it's very hard to pronounce. I'm aware, but so the Alutiiq tribe is not a subsidiary, it's a tribe. So I'm not a member of the Foganac Native Corporation. That's the north side of the island. And so that's another village corporation. So they're in the Kodiak region. But what I believe you're referring to is actually Alutiiq LLC, which is a subsidiary of a Foganac Native Corporation, which they do government contracting. I believe Alutiiq LLC is the holding. It might be the holding company. They may have a different structure, but yeah, it's not. We don't. The tribe as a whole doesn't own it. There's the native village of Foganac, which is also a tribe. And actually, I should explain that to you as well. So there's the corporations, and then there's the tribes. So you have corporations, which are a completely different entity, which are owned by all of the members of a single tribe, right? And so there's no really connection between them other than they're owned by the same people or they're owned by the tribal members of particular tribes. So, yeah.
Well, and listeners, you've heard now the term corporation mentioned a couple of times. So now you'll know what that terminology means as it relates to what Scott and I are talking about.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this series.
Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.